Hello, welcome to Indus News, live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the top stories. In Pakistan, the third day of the multinational maritime exercise Aman is underway with counter-terrorism demonstrations and international band display. Navies of over 40 countries, including the United States, Russia, China and Turkey, are taking part in this year's drills. The exercise will continue until the 16th of February. India's opposition has slammed the federal government for intentionally ignoring prior knowledge of the Pulwama attack. In a tweet, Congress questioned Prime Minister Modi's government over not disclosing the reality about the incident. 40 Indian soldiers were killed in an attack in occupied Jammu Kashmir's Pulwama district on this day in 2019. Thousands of anti-coup protesters have taken to the streets in Myanmar's major cities for a ninth straight day. The military has reinstated a law requiring people to report overnight visitors to their homes to local authorities as police hunt protesters. Earlier, the army suspended privacy laws limiting detention and surveillance. In Kosovo, voting has begun to elect a new parliament. Around 1.8 million people are eligible to vote to elect representatives for the 120-seat House. Pre-poll surveys show the anti-establishment Vetev and Dostoy party as the favorite. These are the second parliamentary elections in Kosovo over the past 1.5 years. China has slammed the United States' remarks accusing Beijing of a lack of transparency in sharing data regarding the origins of the coronavirus with the World Health Organization. A spokesperson for the Chinese embassy in Washington said U.S. criticism has harmed multilateral cooperation and the WHO. The coronavirus has so far claimed nearly 2.4 million lives and infected over 108.5 million people. In Pakistan, over 1,400 contracted the virus and 31 more died overnight, raising the death toll to over 12,300. And in cricket, Pakistan have put South Africa to bat after winning the toss in the third T20 International at the GOVT Stadium in Lahore. South Africa and Pakistan are currently tied in the series after winning one match each. And these were the top stories. We'll be back with the details after a short break. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. We start from Pakistan, where the third day of the multinational maritime exercise Aman is underway with counter-terrorism demonstrations and international band display. Pakistan's Chairman Joint Chiefs of Staff Committee General Nadeem Raza and Naval Chief Admiral Muhammad Amjad Khan Niazi are also present at the occasion. Now, navies of over 40 countries, including the United States, Russia, China and Turkey, are taking part in this year's drills. Aman is organized by the Pakistan Navy every 2 years since 2007. The exercise aims at intensifying operational drills and to improve maritime regional security. The exercise will continue until the 16th of February. Now, India's opposition has slammed the federal government for intentionally ignoring prior knowledge of the Pulwama attack. 40 Indian soldiers were killed in an attack in occupied Jammu and Kashmir's Pulwama district on this day in 2019.
On the second anniversary of the Pulwama attack, Indian opposition party Congress has questioned Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government over not disclosing the reality about the incident. Earlier this year, leaked WhatsApp chat of Indian television host Arnab Goswami revealed New Delhi knew about the attack beforehand. New Delhi was quick to blame Islamabad right after the attack without any proof, despite Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan assured full cooperation in the probe. In the days following the attack, Pakistan cooperated in every way to investigate the violence. Last year, Islamabad submitted a dossier to the United Nations with proofs showing how the attack was a false flag operation. Pakistan has already warned the world regarding India's more false flag operations. Islamabad said the Indian government will use such operations as a pretext to attack Pakistan and to justify its operation of Kashmiris.
Meanwhile, in India, police have arrested an activist in connection with the toolkit to support farmers chaired by Greta Thunberg. Earlier, police also filed a case on charges of criminal conspiracy and sedition over the creators of the toolkit shared by the Swedish climate activist. Meanwhile, the opposition compared the Modi government with the East India Company. It said the ruling party was crushing the poor and empowering big corporations. While working President of Telangana Congress is on a 10-day foot march that will culminate on the 16th of February. Talking to the media, Revant Reddy said the new laws harm farmers and the march supports their protest. In another development, farmer unions are set to intensify their agitation with 7 grand meets across 3 states from today. Still in India, where rescue officials have discovered 12 more bodies from the flash flood hit areas of Uttarakhand's Chamoli district. This has raised the death toll from last week's glacier disaster to 50, with about 154 still missing. Police said the bodies buried in a slush were recovered from the main tunnel in a hydropower project in Tapuvan. The disaster set off when a part of a glacier near the Nanda Devi mountain broke off on February 7th. The subsequent flooding damaged 2 power plants in the northern Indian state. Meanwhile, the search operation is underway for about 30 remaining workers feared trapped in the tunnel. Now, thousands of anti-coup protesters have taken to the streets in Myanmar's major cities for a 9th straight day.
A convoy of thousands on motorbikes and cars drove through the capital, Naypyidaw. Residents banded together to patrol streets in Yangon and second city Mandalay. Meanwhile, the military has reinstated a law requiring people to report their overnight visitors to local authorities as police hunt protesters. The new rulers have suspended laws constraining security forces from detaining suspects or searching private property without court approval. They have also ordered the arrest of well-known backers of mass protests. According to a monitoring group, more than 384 people have been arrested since the February 1st coup.
Now moving to Kosovo, where voting has begun to elect a new parliament. Around 1.8 million people are eligible to vote for the 120-seat House. Pre-poll surveys show the anti-establishment Vetevendoste party as the favourite. These are the second parliamentary elections in Kosovo over the past 1.5 years. It comes after the Constitutional Court ruled the parliamentary vote that installed Abdullah Houthi as Prime Minister was invalid. The government, which was elected by 61 deputies in Parliament, fell after the decision of the court. Now the vote is expected to further complicate a decades-long territorial dispute with Serbia, which does not recognize Kosovo. Now, the United States Senate has acquitted former President Donald Trump in his second impeachment trial over the Capitol riots. The violence on January 6 left 5 people dead, including a police officer. This report has details.
Barely a month since the deadly Washington, D.C. Capitol riots stunned the world, the U.S. Senate convened for a rare weekend session to deliver its verdict on the trial to impeach former President Donald Trump for incitement of insurrection. The 100-member chamber voted 57 to 43, falling 10 votes short of the 2/3 majority required to convict Trump. In a statement following his acquittal, Trump denounced the trial as the greatest witch hunt in history. Trump's lawyers said they were extremely gratified over the outcome.
Thank you all for coming. Obviously, this was a difficult period of time for our country. And myself, Mr. Van der Veen, and the other members of the team are extraordinarily gratified that the United States Senate decided, as they did, to protect our constitutional way of life and not go down the road of endless impeachments.
Reacting to acquittal of Trump, President Joe Biden says democracy is fragile and every American has a duty to defend the truth. Meanwhile, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi slammed Republican senators for voting to acquit Trump.
Oh, these cowardly senators who couldn't face up to what the president did and what was at stake for our country are now going to have a chance to give a little slap on the wrist. We censure people for using stationery for the wrong purpose. We don't censure people for inciting insurrection that kills people in the Capitol.
Trump is the first U.S. president in history to be impeached twice and the first to face a trial after leaving office. If he had been convicted, the Senate could have voted to bar him from running for office again.
Now, China has slammed the United States statement accusing Beijing of lack of transparency in sharing the WHO information regarding origins of COVID-19. Earlier, U.S. National Security Advisor expressed concern about the way China communicated the findings of the WHO's team. In a statement, the Chinese embassy in Washington said United States criticism damaged multilateral cooperation and the WHO. It said the U.S. should not be pointing fingers at China and others who supported the health organization during the pandemic. It added Washington should hold itself to the high standards instead of taking aim at other countries. Meanwhile, members of the World Health Organization team also refuted Washington's allegations. Peter Daszak said he found trust and openness with Chinese counterparts. Now, the coronavirus has so far claimed nearly 2.4 million lives and infected over 108.5 million people. More about the pandemic in this report.
As governments across the world scramble to iron out hurdles in their vaccine drives, people are running out of patience. In Germany, protesters took to the streets in Berlin to protest coronavirus restrictions. 8 protesters were arrested in Cyprus after anti-COVID restrictions crowds clashed with the police in Nicosia. In Canada's British Columbia, hundreds gathered to oppose the curbs, calling them unconstitutional. Meanwhile, the virus continues to ravage the Americans, with over 484,000 dead in the U.S. to date. In South America, Mexico is going through its worst times with over 1,200 deaths in the past 24 hours. Brazil is still among the countries with the highest fatality rate, reporting over 1,000 more deaths and more than 44,000 cases overnight. Peru's health minister, Pilar Mazzatti, has stepped down over inoculating the president before the vaccine became widely available in the country. The Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus has extended its full-scale curfew to stem the spread of COVID-19 until February 2nd.
Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 58 more people have lost their lives to COVID-19, raising the death toll to 12,307. The Health Ministry says 1,404 people tested positive for the virus overnight. The ministry said the total number of cases detected in Pakistan has crossed 563,000. Over 525,000 people have recovered from the virus. The number of active COVID-19 cases in the country stands at 25,635. The ministry says just over 2,000 patients of COVID-19 are admitted across the country. Moving on now, Turkey says it has concluded the second phase of the Operation Claw Eagle against the PKK terrorists in northern Iraq. Ankara launched the operation as an act of self-defense to prevent the terror group from re-establishing possessions. Speaking in Şırnak province, Defense Minister Hulusi Akar said 48 militants were neutralized during the operation. He said these included 2 senior members. Akar said 2 terrorists were captured and the region was mostly cleared of the presence of the group. He added the Turkish forces returned home safely after concluding the critical operation. More news coming up in this bulletin after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back now. Moving on with the news stories to Israel, where thousands took to the streets of Jerusalem in protest against the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Demonstrations over Netanyahu's indictment and handling of the COVID-19 outbreak have entered their 34th week. The protesters holding banners gathered outside Netanyahu's residence in West Jerusalem calling for his resignation. With just a month left in the elections, Netanyahu is facing severe public anger and is also undergoing a trial in court. The embattled Israeli Prime Minister faces charges of bribery, fraud and breach of trust. Now in Thailand, pro-democracy activists clash with police after wrapping Bangkok's democracy monument in red cloth. They say the red cloth on the monument represented the blood of fighters for democracy. Protesters threw paint at police and several small bangs were heard during a standoff near a city shrine. Police said over 20 officers were injured in the clashes and 8 people were detained for questioning. The demonstrations was in reaction to this week's arrests of 4 protest figures under charges of insulting the monarchy. The student movement emerged last year and smashed long-held taboos by openly criticizing the king. Now, Catalan voters are heading to the polls for an election that will test the strength of the Spanish region's pro-independence movement. Opinion polls show the anti-independence socialists slightly ahead of the rival separatists. They also point to a low voter turnout amid the pandemic and the risk of a surge in infections. But the socialists will need support from other parties to form the first anti-independence regional government in 9 years. Now, in the last election, an anti-independence centrist party placed first, but the 2 main rival separatist parties elbowed it out to form a government. Now, in Guinea, 4 people have died of Ebola in the first resurgence of the disease in 5 years. Health officials say another 5 have tested positive for the virus in the southeastern part of the country. The patients fell ill with diarrhea, vomiting and bleeding after attending a burial in the Zerekore region. Officials say the 5 still alive have been isolated in treatment centers. The last major outbreak of Ebola in West Africa started in Guinea, which went on to kill over 11,000 people. Earlier this month, Congo reported 3 new Ebola cases in eastern North Kivu province. Well, now more than 100 people have been injured after a major 7.3 magnitude earthquake jolted northeastern Japan. The country's Met agency says the quake struck off the Fukushima prefecture at a depth of 60 kilometers. The agency said the quake was an aftershock of the devastating quake that struck the same area in 2011. The quake triggered power outages, halting trains and causing a landslide. The quake also shook buildings in the Japanese capital Tokyo hundreds of kilometers away. Aftershocks reaching 4.7 magnitude continued for hours following the tremors. The Met agency has warned of aftershocks for several days. Now, earthquakes are common in Japan, which accounts for about 20% of the world's quakes of magnitude 6 or greater. Now, Russian President Vladimir Putin says the policy of deterring Russia is intensifying as the country grows stronger. He said Russia's potential adversaries are more and more irked by its success. In a meeting with media outlets, Putin said Russia's influence in the post-Soviet space is growing and the opponents want to counter it. Meanwhile, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and U.S. Special Envoy John Kerry have agreed to promote bilateral cooperation on climate change. In a phone conversation, Lavrov welcomed Washington's return to the Paris Accord. This comes ahead of the preparatory events for the 26th United Nations Climate Change Conference in Glasgow. Now, in Netherlands, sub-zero temperatures have frozen many water bodies across the country. Citizens were quick to capitalize on the situation and went skating on the icy surface. Let's have a look.
With most places closed across the country due to a lockdown, citizens have found themselves at a loss for entertainment. But thanks to the recent drop in temperatures, frozen lakes and ponds have provided an interesting opportunity to have fun. Locals are now taking full advantage of nature's skating rinks.
This is the perfect reason to go out and have a little fun with the museums and everything being closed. So this is perfect what you can do besides walking, because I think everybody saw the whole of Amsterdam with walking.
Members of a local skating club had been out to drill a small hole in the ice to measure its thickness. They have made sure locals could venture into the center of the pond safely.
Yesterday we had almost 7 centimeters of ice. That was on Wednesday afternoon when children were no longer in school. There was also a little snow that covered the ice, so we opened up the pond, which did undermine the ice, but there were a lot of children who had a great time.
Queues have formed around repair shops as locals prepared for a weekend skating in the center of Amsterdam. They say everyone in the country loves to skate, so the cold weather is no obstacle to their high spirits.
Now, a citizen in Germany has created Playmobil processions to get around the cancellations of carnivals amid the pandemic. Details in this report.
For many in Germany, Carnival is a serious matter, especially the famous Rosenmontag parade in Cologne, where decorated floats and people in costume walk through the city, throwing sweets to the crowds. However, the carnival was cancelled this year due to the pandemic, and the city had to find some other way for the show to go on. Subsequently, the carnival organizers called for people to recreate the parade using toy figures. This inspired the Goosberg family to recreate the Rosenmontag parade in a very artistic and detailed manner using their Playmobil.
Decisive for the idea was actually the Bonn Carnival Festival Committee, which, due to the cancellation Rose Monday parade or the cancelled carnival in general, asked for people to recreate it with toy figures. Yes, that was actually the initial spark for the idea, and then I really got into it, so to speak, and first grabbed my children's Playmobil, and then we started the procession, and then it got bigger and bigger.
The thoughtful solution by Carnival Organizing Committee has provided the Germans an opportunity to enjoy their cultural activities amid coronavirus lockdown.
Now, Saudi Arabia and Qatar have resumed trading goods through the Salwa and Abu Samra border crossing. Qatari authorities say preventive measures will be in place to prevent the spread of COVID-19 between the ports. It said truck drivers arriving at the port must have a certificate showing negative COVID-19 test results recognized by the Saudi Health Ministry. This comes a month after the Gulf state restored diplomatic relations with Doha, ending a 3-year diplomatic dispute. Meanwhile, stocks in the Gulf are trading mixed, with most bourses hovering around the flat line. The Dubai financial market traded roughly flat, with companies moving in opposite directions. Amlak Finance plunged 5%, while the Islamic Arab Insurance advanced over 3.5%. The Abu Dhabi Securities Exchange dipped fractionally, with banking stocks weighing the most. Qatar Exchange moved little, with Qatar Insurance slipping 1%, and the Kuwait Premier Index traded unchanged. And now let's have a look at the weather updates around the world. Well, that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.